It's Ed from Bloomfield Cemetery, making another video. Today I wanted to talk about Isaac Kuffel. Now, I could talk about the things that most everybody knows about Isaac Kuffel. He was a single man who came to Bloomfield in his early 30s. He was a handful who arrived first here in town, and he was such an early inhabitant of Bloomfield that it is said the Hogues owned the western side of town, and Isaac Kuffel owned the eastern side of town if you split Main Street in between them. And that may have been the case for the majority of it, but you got Henry Hall and a lot of other of the early men who came to Bloomfield and established ranches in their own space. But Isaac Kuffel did indeed own the Washington Hotel that was on the southern side of Petaluma Valley Ford Road. And up Main Street on the eastern side of Maine, he owned most of that land that stretched up to the mill, and then up into the hills where Henry Hall's ranch extended over the hill. So I utilized the 1867 map to kind of help show some of the area that I'm talking about here. So this is the Washington Hotel. So you can see how the Washington Hotel right here is placed directly at the end of Liberty Street. This is a Presbyterian church, and here's the Washington Hotel building. And then there's other outbuildings here. Now I notice on the 1883 panorama map that was taken on the hillside back here, this large building right here at the intersections appears to be missing. So that building was burnt down in November of 1883. It was the folks who were living there at the time, the Stanleys, who were the Stanley and Shield family, were staying at the hotel, caretaking for it. They refused lodging to two travelers, and they believe that as a result of refusing lodging to these two travelers, they burned the hotel down. So while the map indicates the location of the Washington Hotel at the end of what is now Morrow Street, and was land previously owned by the Becks. So the large hotel building is missing in the photo, but the outbuildings are still there. Without a better photo of the front of the building, it's difficult to tell exactly, what we would be looking at in terms of the hotel building. So as I'll pull up the large photo, the panoramic photo, you could see here's the church. Here's Liberty Road that comes out right here. So this large building, which is indicated on the map, the outbuildings with it, this is the pretty much the area where the Washington Hotel would have been. So while this photo was written to be 1878, my problem with that is the hotel's gone, and the Oddfellow building is there. Oddfellow building was started, the construction was started in 1879, completed 1880. So this picture is a window of 3 years. So 1880 to 1883. That's it. And the Washington Hotel burned down in November of 1883. So So that's where I get my timeline. Now sometimes I got a lot of dates running through my head. So I think in yesterday's video I referred to this panorama shot as 1886, which I'm not sure where that came from, but anyway, 1883 is generally how I refer to it. So Isaac Kuffel would later move into Petaluma. He still owned the property, and let's see, I'll roll back a little bit. He married um, a woman in Bloomfield. So he came to Bloomfield single in his early 30s, and he married a woman with the last name of Patton in Bloomfield, and they had a son named Clarence. Clarence died, I believe he was still an infant. It's a little difficult to tell on his headstone. He didn't live long enough to show up in any census or article. So Clarence, his headstone is at the cemetery. Oddly enough, he is the only member of the family that uh, that has a headstone at the cemetery, and it's fortunate that we were able to find his headstone, as the Hitchcock, the large Hitchcock memorial, had um, a bush growing behind it. One of the lots was either available or I believe was had the Lamb family in it. Lamb family moved away. Nobody cared for their lot, and these bushes grew up to be huge, massive in size. Dale and I focused on taking the bush complex that was behind the Hitchcock burial site. It took us like a week just to get the large bushes, trees out of there. We had no idea what we'd find in there, because even when we were kids, we remember that huge bush being in there. So once we got it cut down, then we burned a lot of it, and then there was still so much root in there that we had what we called tractor day, where we rented a backhoe. I'm not sure why I just didn't have Bob Mattery come up there and help us out, but we were planting a lot of trees and doing a lot of other work, so we just rented a backhoe and we went up there and took out all the roots. So, um, and then we started raking out all of the root balls in the dirt and breaking things up, and we found uh, pieces of Hollis Hitchcock's spire that came down in the '06 earthquake and broke. And for whatever reason, the 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 mason the stonemason cut or salvage the remaining half of Hollis Hitchcock's spire. If you compare the old photo of Hitchcock's site to the new photo, it's like half. The spire is about half. And he left some of the remains of the spire um, off to the side, this area where Dale and I had been digging. So, as we were digging through there looking for artifacts, I found pretty good sized pieces of this polished rose quartz that I would later come to understand was remains from the broken spire of Hollis Hitchcock. So anyway, we're going through this, and we also find what we think is a footstone, but come to find out, it's like three pieces of a small headstone that turns out to be for Clarence Kuffel, an infant, a child. So back then, a lot of times they wouldn't even name their child for some time out of concern that they may not live. So the fact that it was a young infant, he did get a name of Clarence, and his headstone was badly broken. We repaired it, glued it back together, and fortunately, when something gets broken and moved, quite often the base remains intact and located wherever it is, whether it's a headstone. And then sometimes when it's a footstone, the footstone will either get pushed down or broken and fall over and then covered over. So, we're scratching our head wondering, where does this, whatever it is, go? In this case, it happened to be the headstone for Clarence. So it fits like a puzzle piece. It's relatively close by. I think it was like 2 rows back, maybe 3 rows back. And so we get it glued up, we get it placed back. So at least we know where Clarence Kuffel goes. So Clarence Kuffel passed away in 1864. 2005, maybe 2006, we're up at the cemetery working. Here's an elderly couple walking around the cemetery. Now, when that happens, I'm pretty good about going over and introducing myself, asking if I can help them locate somebody, because I want to help them. I also want to introduce myself and say, hey, if you have relatives here, can you please help us know the folks better? And that's worked really well. So this fella introduced him. He was there with this elderly gentleman with his wife. His wife had these dark sunglasses on. Apparently, she was partially blind. But the gentleman introduced himself as Leland Schwartz, and he said he's a relative. He's looking for his uncle, and he's a relative of the Kuffel family. So it's like, okay, let's walk over and I'll show you the Kuffel that we have here. So we're standing there looking at Clarence Kuffel's restored headstone. And Leland is telling me that, now Leland at the time is in his early 90s, let's say 92. And he's very sharp, talking about Clarence as his uncle. Like, wow, okay. So if Clarence is Isaac Kuffel's son, and this son is your uncle, man, we got from like the beginning of Bloomfield to now standing right here. So I found that fascinating. And so Leland was talking about his mom and her relationship with Isaac, and also talking about an aunt that he had who was a young lady. He thought 19 or 20, who was deaf and mute, and how she was struck by a train, killed by a train because she couldn't hear it. And the whole time I'm listening to him, I thought it was my assumption, probably, I'm sure it was, that he was talking about Valley Forge, as if, okay, everybody still lives out here, and we don't have a train, so it's got to be Valley Forge. Okay, so time goes on, and they're very generous with sharing information with me. I invited them down to my house, talking. They're interested in, my antiques, my clocks, and things like that. And over time, over the next, 7 years, they send Christmas cards and such. And I get an email from his Leland's niece up in Healdsburg that he wants to treat Dale and I to lunch. So we set up a meeting at McNear's in Petaluma, downtown on the bend on Main Street. Go in there, and Leland is sitting in the booth. He's got a big smile, and he's happy to see us. We're happy to see them, shaking everybody's hands because he did invite other family members there. He has a stack of history that he and his wife had gathered, and he said he wanted to donate it to the cemetery. So I just thought, wow, okay. I mean, what a wonderful thing for him to do. And we'll come to find out, I've gone through it many times. The stack contains the history of not just Isaac Kuffel, but all of the Kuffels. So there's a kind of a small amount that pertains to Isaac Kuffel and his family. Um, so all that is wonderful and everything. And then later, in doing the research that I do, I find this story of Lena Kuffel. She was referred to as Lena, and she was living in Petaluma. She worked at the silk mill on what's now Lakeville Highway. The silk mill was by the railroad tracks, and in March, a lot of rain, a lot of mud. People who worked in the mill would often walk from town out to the mill. Because of the mud and such, they would walk on the railroad tracks. There were no sidewalks. The article specifically states no sidewalks, the mud, they preferred to walk on the railroad tracks. She couldn't hear the train. She apparently was walking on the side, and then in order to avoid a puddle, she, at the last moment, stepped in front of the train. Her body was badly mangled. She actually lived for a few hours that day, and then she passed. She was 19 years old, and her remains were put at Bloomfield Cemetery. That comes as a surprise to me because we don't have anything that indicates her name on a plot map or a memorial stone that we've found so far. But we do know where Clarence Kuffel is. I trust that to be helpful. There is a wooden marker just to the right of Clarence that's obviously unidentified because the wooden ones just didn't hold up. And this accident that happened to Lena was March of 1893. So those headstones just, or the wooden markers, just didn't hold up. I don't recall ever seeing information on wooden markers at the cemetery. I saw a lot of the wooden markers, but the information just wouldn't hold up, wouldn't remain. It would be weathered and destroyed or broken and disappears. So so Isaac Kuffel, he would pass away, and also his remains were cremated. And newspaper articles say that he was also buried out in Bloomfield Cemetery. There again, nothing. I have nothing on a plot map for Isaac Kuffel, and no marker, no indicator at all about where Isaac Kuffel is at, which is really unfortunate because he's practically a founding member of the town. And the fact that he had a hotel, he invested a lot of time and money, his personal treasure, in establishing a hotel in Bloomfield, the Washington Hotel. And unfortunately, his first wife, was institutionalized, and there would be a court case later on about what she was entitled to of his estate and such. So anyway, that's a connectivity between Isaac Kuffel, his relatives, his family, and the cemetery. That's kind of how I like to tie all this together. And these things like that, where especially where there's firsthand accounts, stories that have been shared with me, I want to have those stories out in the general public. So whoever does this after and is curious about things, the more information I can get out in the public, then the better the understanding of the story of Bloomfield will be. That's my hope. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll probably do another one of these tomorrow. All right.